Hi everybody! Today I am going to show you a fun project, and that's how to make glass shards. I am also going to show how to apply the shards to a bead, and I have the same bead, two different shards on either side of the bead. One is melted in and one is left raised, so it's all your preference. So what I have here is I have a 1/4-inch blow tube. You can have basically any size blow tube you want. And I have this blow tube which is dedicated just for shards. So there's no bead release or anything on this tube. And I just reuse this tube for blowing shards over and over again. And the first shard I am going to make is going to be an ebony ivory shard. It's an ebony ivory by a Fetre, and it's mixed intense black with ivory, and it will make a really neat varied shard when it's blown out. And so the first thing I do is make just a little disc on the end of this mandrel and fuse it in nice and well. And I'm just gonna smash it down and kind of push that glass off the end so it sticks off the end of the blow tube. And it's only about a 1/4 inch on the edge of the blow tube there. And now I'm just going to add the other glass that I want for blowing out my shard. And as you can see, I'm just swirling it in different directions because these rods are basically just long stripes, and I want the ebony and ivory varied and kind of swirled around and mixed in the final piece. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm just twisting it around in any direction you really want to put it, and just layering on enough glass there at the end to blow out a shard you want. Now these shards are blown very, very thin, so you can smash them into pieces and apply them to beads later. And so really, it doesn't really matter what the shape is. They can be all crooked and lopsided. It doesn't really matter. So you don't need to blow out a perfectly round ball here. You want to superheat it, and I zoomed out here to show you, and I kind of go off screen at the top, but I'm waiting. I'm not blowing yet. I'm waiting and waiting until it actually starts slowing down the floppy process. And then I slowly start blowing. And at the very end, I start blowing harder and harder to get that as thin as possible. And see, it's kind of all crooked, not very even of a ball or anything, but it's not necessary. And now that it's cooled, so now it's cooled, and I'm going to use a container. I just have a coffee container here, but metal is really good, metal or glass, and I'm just going to break this off into the container. And as you see, it came off in a big ball. Sometimes it will shatter, but this time it came off in a big ball right off the mandrel, and so now I'm going to just crush it. And you crush it into little pieces. Some are bigger, some are smaller. And those are the shard pieces that you use to place onto your beads. And so this container, being plastic like it is, I would not leave this on my workbench. And I do store my shards usually in metal containers, or if they're on a shelf, I'll store them in plastic. But now I have a little bit of glass stuck on the end of my mandrel there, or my blow tube, and you just need to heat that and then quench it in water, in cold water, and all the glass usually pops off. So for this shard that I'm creating here, I'm using various silver color glasses just to make a varied silver colored shard. And I'm using various glasses. I'm using some double helix glass, I'm using some striking color glass, and I believe I'm also using some belladonna glass from Arrow Springs, which might be this one here that I'm using as the base color. I'm not even sure because I did this video actually earlier in December, which I'm now voicing over, so I don't remember all the colors I used in this one. And there's one, I think that was that Echo? I'm not sure what it said, but you could probably slow it down and see what it said. But I was trying to show the colors I'm using, and as you see, I'm just swiping them on in various layers and in just different swirls back and forth. And I'm going to mix this, I believe, a little bit more when I start actually going to blow this out. And so just various layers of silver glass, and we'll just see how it comes out at the end. And that's a striking color, I know that. That's a striking color, silver glass, which makes really pretty blues and purples. And I have a very small piece there, so I'm trying to be very careful with the flame. I'm pretty close to it. And I had to get tweezers there to finish it off. And so you could see all the various colors there already, even though it's not blown out yet. And I'm going to take another stick here and see, I'm going to swirl it back and forth. I'm making little curly cues and swirls in there and pulling that glass around to kind of blend it. You don't have to do this. You could just blow it out the way you want. But I wanted a lot of the different colors blended together. And so I swirled it a little bit. And now I'm going to blow it out or melt it to blow it out, just like I did the first one. And so now you could see it kind of all muddied out and it looks beige. And that's because it lost its strike. But here I go. I'm going to superheat this so it gets really floppy. And I'm holding this. See, I try to get my face in the shot here. And I'm not blowing yet. I don't blow until it slows down its flopping around. Then you blow very gently at first. And as it gets bigger and bigger, you blow harder and harder and harder to make it as thin as possible for these shards. And as you can see, it's very translucent. We got some cool colors on there because it's struck back again. And that is that shard. Now I'm going to break this into pieces just like the first one. And now I'm going to make a bead. And I have my 2 shards you could see there on the table, which I'm going to use. And the first one I'm going to lay down is the striking color. And I have a black lentil shape, just a hand-shaped lentil that I'm using. And I'm out of screen, but you could see that I'm like swiping. You can see the shadow of my arm. I'm swiping that back and forth way back in the flame. It's like not even where you could see the visible flame anymore. I'm just getting a tiny bit of heat into that shard. And I am using the heat that is on that bead. And sorry I went out of shot there, but the next one I lay down will be in shot. But you're using the actual heat of the bead to melt that shard. The shards are so thin that the heat coming off the bead will cause the shard to fuse and stick to your base bead. And so basically that's the heat you're using to apply the shard. And so I'm just now tapping in the final corners, and I'm just being very gentle with this. You can leave it raised like it is right now. You could see some edge there. You can leave it raised like that, or you can melt it all the way in. It all depends on how you want your bead to look in the end. And you can layer various shards on top of each other. I was just showing how to actually place a shard on a bead for this example. So I only did one of each color. I did one of the striking colors, silver color, and then one of the ebony ivory color, just as an example. But I could have layered multiple shards over one another, you know, melt one in and then place another one. And on this one, with the silver colors, I wanted to get a little more strike with the cool, blues and greens that come out of it. And so I decided to melt this shard all the way in. And so I meld it in with the bead to get it super hot to start the striking process. And then I will, as I'm placing the second shard, see, I have a little bit of strike color coming in, but some of it lost its strike and it's totally clear now. And so I have to bring that back out and try to get some nice blues. But I'm going to keep striking this as I do the second shard. So I'll let this side of the bead cool while I'm placing the second shard, and so I can continue striking it as I go. And so I'm still not getting a lot of strike out. I didn't have it cool enough. So now I'm going to start with the second shard, which is the ebony ivory shard. And this one is actually in shot, so you'll be able to see. So I'm warming that very gently. It's not even glowing or anything. It's just getting a little bit of heat in the background. And I'm just heating that base bead. I'm getting a really nice orange glow to it, so it will attach that shard and start melting that shard. And so I just place it where I want it and push it down. And that's it. And it's basically on there. And so all I have to do is secure the edges and make sure they're all melded and attached firmly, and getting around that curve there at the edge, around the angle. And I'm going to leave this one raised. You want to make sure it's all secured around all the edges, even though it's raised. You don't want any sharp edges coming off. You don't want to cut your customers with these beads. So you want to make sure it's nice and melded, but still raised. So I basically do not want to heat that ivory anymore to make it meld in, because it will melt all the way in if I keep heating it. So I'm trying to avoid it for the most part. I could give a little heat on the surface, but I try to avoid the actual edges, because I don't want them to melt in. And so now I'm just going to decorate this bead. So I have it sped up. You don't have to watch this part if you don't want to, because the basic placing of the shards is completed. But I'm just putting a bunch of dots all over the bead, and it's however you want to decorate this. I could have just had other shards layered on here. I could have even put a silver glass right over the ivory, like half over the ivory, half over the black. So you can have some variance in the way the silver comes out looking with different backgrounds. So it's basically whatever design you want to come up with. But I'm just adding a bunch of black dots, and I'm going back and see, I'm trying to strike that silver color in that shard, and it's starting to come out. It's kind of hard to see. I don't have great lighting, but it's starting to come out. You could see greens and purples there. And I'm going to continue to put some dots on here. I have some ivory. I'm going to also add to the little black dots for the ebony ivory side of this bead. And then I'm going to put some silver color dots on the other side to accent the silver color shards that I have on that side. And I'm bordering around the shard with just tiny little ivory dots going all the way around the shard border. And you don't have to do this. You could just leave it shards, or you could put stringer lines on it. You can put a flower on top of the shard. Of course, it's all up to you of how you want to design your final bead. But you want to make sure whenever you put down dots, like I'm doing here, you want to make sure all those dots are melded in properly. You don't want any undercuts. So you don't want a circle that cuts back in before it fuses to the bead. You want it to be flush. So you want like a half circle sticking up from your bead, because you don't want it to curve back under, which we call undercuts, because those dots could pop off later. It will not be a secured dot on top of your bead. So you want to make sure they're fused in at least halfway, so it's like a half circle or even a little less than a half circle sticking out from your bead. And so here's the silver dots I'm putting on. This is striking color silver glass, which is a wonderful glass. I love this glass. Makes really beautiful colors. And I'm putting little dots all around that shard, because a lot of like half the bead was just the black, and so I was covering that with dots and then leaving basically the shard exposed and not really covering that part with dots. And I'm doing the same. I'm making sure these little dots are getting melded in, and I'm being very careful, as you can see, because they are tiny dots. So I'm going kind of like in and out of the flame, and I'm trying to focus on just a few dots, or even just one dot at a time that might be sticking out a little too far. You want to make sure those are all melded in properly. And so I'm just trying to get those dots to strike up nicely. Make sure they're all melded. Make sure I'm getting a strike to them. And I gotta let them cool a little bit. And I think I pretty much am finished with this bead. And here I'm gonna try to do a close-up and get some good light here. And there's the striking color side. And there's the raised ivory side. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.